Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep into some fascinating excerpts from the book of Romans.
Oh, Romans. Yeah.
This letter, written by the Apostle Paul, it's really had a huge impact on how we think about faith, really.
Absolutely.
And we're going to try and uncover its core message and try to understand why it's still so relevant today.
I think it's so interesting how Romans it grapples with these questions about faith and how God relates to us.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the kinds of things that people are still asking today.
Oh, absolutely.
So still very relevant.
Right from the beginning, he calls himself a slave of Jesus Christ, which,
Yeah.
can seem a little bit jarring at first.
Yeah, it's not a term we use lightly today.
Right. But back then it was actually like a real title of honor.
Right.
And it really implied, just complete devotion to the
Yeah.
cause.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how that idea, this slavery being a privilege, it really sets the stage for everything else.
Yeah.
What do you think it means when someone views themselves as completely devoted to something,
Mhm.
to the point of being a slave to it?
It's really a radical way to think about commitment.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if we kind of shy away from that level of dedication sometimes.
It's a high bar, for sure. And then there's the way he talks about the gospel of God.
Right.
It's more than just, good news.
Right.
It could be the gospel that originates from God,
Right.
or it could be a gospel about God himself.
Uh-huh.
Maybe both. And I think this ambiguity, this was intentional,
Right.
to show us just how central God is to the message.
Absolutely.
That makes sense, yeah. And you can feel that passion,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Paul's passion for this gospel
Oh, yeah.
calls it God's power for salvation.
Yeah.
For everyone, Jew or Gentile.
Mm-hmm.
He's not ashamed of it at all.
Not at all. No. And then there's this idea of the righteousness of God,
Right.
which is a really, it's complex, isn't it?
Oh, very much so.
I mean, some scholars, they say it's the righteous status that God gives us.
Mm-hmm.
Others think it's about God, actively justifying us, making us righteous.
Yeah.
And then there are those who think it's just talking about God's inherent righteousness.
I find it so intriguing how one phrase can lead to so much debate
Right.
and so many different interpretations. How do you make sense of it?
Yeah.
This righteousness of God.
Yeah. What do you think it might mean for us today?
I think, to me, it really challenges how we often think about, earning our way to God.
Yeah.
It's almost like it suggests that righteousness is something that's given to us, not something that we achieve.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
And it definitely connects to this idea of grace, which is, as you know, so important for Paul throughout Romans.
Right. Yeah.
But he doesn't stop at the nice stuff, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He's also pretty clear about the consequences of rejecting God.
Right. Yeah. And he gets into some challenging ideas there.
He does. He talks about God's wrath.
Yeah.
He talks about the suppression of truth, the worship of idols.
He's making a bold statement
Mm-hmm.
about how serious it is to live apart from God.
Yeah.
And he says nobody is exempt from God's judgment.
Right. Nobody gets a free pass.
No. He even says that those who judge others while doing the same things themselves, they condemn themselves.
Yeah, yeah. It's like he's speaking to that tendency we all have, right? To see the
Definitely.
faults in others more easily than we see our own.
It's a reminder to look inward.
Yeah, yeah. Before we start pointing fingers.
Yeah.
And then this leads into the idea that true Jewish identity, it's not about outward rituals,
Right.
but about a circumcision of the heart,
Yeah.
a transformation that happens through the Spirit.
It's about an interchange.
Yeah, yeah. It's like he's saying that real faith, it's more than just going through the motions.
Right.
And he even quotes Psalm 32, highlighting the blessing of forgiveness and the fact that God credits righteousness apart from works.
Yeah. And this is where Abraham becomes so important.
Yeah.
He's held up as this ultimate example of faith.
Absolutely. And his faith, I mean, he believed God's promise, right?
Right.
That he would be the father of many nations, even though, I mean, he was old.
He was old. Sarah was barren.
Sarah was barren. I mean, it was impossible.
Impossible.
But his trust in God was just, I mean, it was complete.
His faith was credited to him as righteousness.
Yeah.
Even before he was circumcised.
Yeah.
It shows you that true faith, it goes way deeper
Yeah.
than any kind of external markers.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah.
How does that story resonate with you?
Well, it makes me think about those times in my life when I've had to trust God
Mm-hmm.
when things felt impossible.
Right.
It's a good reminder that even when it doesn't make sense, God is still faithful.
Absolutely.
It really shows the power of faith.
Yeah.
And then Paul goes on to contrast living by the flesh with living by the Spirit.
Yeah.
And he says, those who are led by the Spirit, they experience true freedom.
This idea of living by the Spirit, it's really intriguing.
Yeah.
What do you think that actually looks like?
That's a great question.
Practically, I mean, how do we know if we're being led by the Spirit?
Yeah, that's a question we'll need to explore further
Okay.
as we continue our deep dive
Yeah.
into Romans. So we were talking about how radical Paul's idea of faith is,
Yeah.
this complete surrender to God.
Yeah.
And it's not like a one-time decision, is it?
No.
It's about how we live.
It impacts how we live every day.
Exactly. And he keeps saying that even when we stumble, God doesn't.
Right. He doesn't waver.
He uses this really interesting analogy. You know, he talks about being a debtor to Greeks, barbarians,
Right.
wise and foolish, to everyone.
Yeah. What do you think he's getting at there?
I think he's saying that he's obligated to share this message with everyone,
Right.
no matter who they are or where they come from.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter their background, their status, nothing.
Exactly. It highlights this universality of the gospel and our responsibility to share it.
Right.
But then that brings up some really tough questions too.
It does.
Like the one Paul asks himself about those who haven't even heard the message.
Right.
How can they believe if they've never been exposed to it?
Yeah. That's a question that has troubled theologians for centuries, hasn't it?
It has. And it makes you think
It does.
about how we share this message today,
Right.
how we can be more effective.
Yeah. And reach people from all different walks of life.
Exactly. It's not just about preaching, but about understanding the people you're talking to.
Meeting them where they are.
Right. And Paul, he definitely doesn't avoid tough issues, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He talks about Israel's rejection of Christ
He does.
with a lot of sorrow,
Yeah.
but he doesn't shy away from the theological depth of it either.
No.
It's like he's really wrestling with this tension,
Yeah.
you know, between God's choice
Yeah.
and human free will.
Right, right. What do you think about that whole idea?
Well, he even brings up Pharaoh, you know,
Ah.
hardening his heart against God. It's complicated.
It is.
It makes you ask questions about God's grace,
Yeah.
about our role in salvation.
Right.
So what do you make of it all?
This idea of God's sovereignty. I mean, does that mean that some people are predestined
Right.
and others aren't?
It's a tough one to answer definitively, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Paul seems to be saying that God's plan ultimately includes everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike.
Right.
But how that plays out for each individual is a bit of a mystery, I think. But even as he acknowledges this pain
Yeah.
of Israel's rejection, he doesn't let go of this idea of unity
Right.
and love.
Yeah, love within the Christian community.
Right.
He says we should be welcoming each other, just as Christ welcomed us, and to not judge each other.
Right. Over things that are disputable.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such a relevant message today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We see so much division even within the church.
Right. Right.
It's so easy to focus on what separates us
Yeah.
and forget about what unites us, our faith in Christ
Right.
and our shared mission.
Yeah. I think Paul reminds us that real fellowship requires grace and truth, both.
That's it. We need to hold on to our convictions,
Mm-hmm.
but we also need to extend grace to those who see things differently.
Yeah.
It's not just about putting up with each other.
Right.
It's about building each other up.
Yeah. Yeah. And he even calls out specific people, you know, in the Roman church, commending them for their faithfulness and service.
He does. It gives you a little window, doesn't it?
It does.
Into what the early church was like.
Yeah.
This vibrant community where people really supported each other.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we're not meant to go through this alone.
Absolutely not.
We need each other.
We do.
We need that support, that accountability,
Yeah.
that encouragement.
Yeah. It's so important.
It is. And Paul doesn't just talk in these vague terms, you know.
No, he doesn't.
He gets really specific
He does.
about what it means to live out our faith.
Right.
He talks about helping the poor, welcoming strangers.
Being hospitable.
Yes, living peacefully with everyone.
Right. Like really practical things.
It's about, you know, living out the love of Christ in our everyday lives,
Yeah.
in every little interaction we have.
Right. And even things like submitting to governing authorities, paying taxes.
Right.
I mean, not exactly glamorous, are they?
No, not the most exciting parts,
Right.
but still important.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that our faith shapes how we interact with the world around us.
Yeah, we're called to be good citizens.
We are. We're called to respect authority, and to work for the good of everyone.
Yeah. But on the flip side,
Yeah.
he also warns us
He does.
to be careful, to be discerning. Yes.
And to avoid people who cause division.
Right, those who get in the way of the gospel.
Right.
It's not just about being nice to everyone, is it?
No, it's not.
It's about protecting the church.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unity and its integrity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like Jesus said,
Mhm.
be wise as serpents.
Yeah.
Innocent as doves.
Right, right.
We need to be aware of those who cause trouble
Mhm.
while still being open and loving
Yeah.
to those who genuinely want to grow
Right, yeah.
in their faith.
And then after all that, he finishes with this reminder that God is in control.
He does.
He tells us to be alert,
Mm.
to stand firm in our faith,
Right?
to be strong
Yes.
in the Lord.
It's a message of hope, isn't it?
It is.
A message of encouragement that even when we face challenges,
Yeah.
we can trust in God's victory.
Yeah.
He even says that God will crush Satan under our feet.
Powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
Of God's triumph over evil.
It's a reminder that even though things might be tough now,
Yeah.
we can be sure that God is working everything out
He is.
for good,
Mhm.
for those who love him. It's just amazing, isn't it, how Paul manages to bring together these deep theological ideas
Right.
with like actual practical advice on how to live as a Christian.
He doesn't just leave us hanging with the theory.
Right, right.
He gives us a way to put it into practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing he really focuses on is unity within the church.
Oh, yeah, he keeps coming back to that.
He's very passionate about it.
He is,
You know,
really.
welcoming each other, just
Mhm.
as Christ welcomed us.
Yeah.
Not judging each other over things that are, debatable.
Right, right.
It's a message we need to hear even today, I think.
Oh, absolutely. With all the division and infighting we see.
Right, right. It's easy to get caught up in our differences, isn't it?
It is.
And forget the things that unite us.
Yeah, like our faith in Christ,
Right.
our mission to share his love.
Yeah.
Paul's reminding us that real fellowship,
Hmm.
it needs grace and truth.
Right.
We hold on to our convictions, but we also offer grace.
Yeah, to those who disagree.
Exactly.
And it's not just about tolerating each other. It's about actively building each other up.
Yes.
I mean, he even names specific people
he does.
in the Roman church,
Mhm.
praising them for their faithfulness and service.
Yeah, it's like a little snapshot, isn't it?
It is.
Of the early church, this
Yeah.
lively community where they supported one another.
Right, right.
It shows us that we're not meant to be alone in this.
Absolutely not. We need each other.
We do.
We need that support, that accountability,
Mm.
encouragement.
It's so crucial.
It is. And he doesn't just give these like vague ideas.
No.
He really gets into specifics
He does.
about how to live out our faith, like practically.
In everyday life.
Right.
Things like contributing to the needs of the poor,
Mm-hmm.
showing hospitality to strangers.
Right. Living peacefully with everyone.
It's about embodying Christ's love in everything we do, even the small things.
Yeah. Even submitting to governing authorities, paying taxes.
Yeah.
Not exactly the most exciting stuff.
No, not the most glamorous part of being a Christian,
Right.
but it matters.
It does, because our faith shapes how we engage with the world.
Exactly. We're called to be good citizens,
Right.
to respect authority,
Mm-hmm.
to contribute to the common good.
Yeah. But then there's also that warning, right?
There is.
To be discerning,
Mm-hmm.
to watch out for those who stir up division,
Right.
those who hinder the gospel.
It's about protecting the church.
Yeah.
It's unity. It's
Mhm.
integrity.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not just about being nice to everyone.
Well,
It's
no.
about wisdom,
Yes.
being wise and discerning.
Like Jesus said,
Right.
wise as serpents,
Mhm.
innocent as doves.
We need to recognize those who create trouble
We do.
while still being open to those who are genuine,
Absolutely.
who want to grow in their faith.
Yeah.
And after all of that, he finishes with this powerful reminder that God is in control.
He does.
He tells us to be alert,
Yeah.
to stand firm in our faith,
That stands strong.
to be strong in the Lord.
It's a message of hope, don't you think?
It is, it really is, and encouragement
Mm-hmm.
that no matter what challenges we face,
Yeah.
we can be confident in God's victory.
He says that God himself will crush Satan under our feet.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is.
It's an image of God's ultimate triumph
Mm.
over evil.
Yeah. It reminds us that even when things are tough,
Mm-hmm.
we can trust that God is working everything out.
For good,
Yeah.
for those who love him.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into Romans today,
Yeah.
I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of this
Mhm.
really rich and complex letter
It's a letter that has spoken to so many people.
It has.
Across centuries.
It really is a timeless message
It
of what it
is.
means to follow Christ.
So as you go about your week, think about what we've talked about today.
What really stood out to you?
Mm-hmm.
How might Paul's words change the way you live?
That's a great question.
And join us next time
Yes.
for another deep dive.
Into a brand new topic.
We're always excited to explore new ideas
We are.
and share them with you.
Thanks for listening, everyone.